The sun had barely risen above the horizon, but for little Aurora and Helena, the day was already underway. The sisters, both 8 years old, had signs of a childhood spent on the margins on their faces. His dark hair was disheveled, and his hands bore the marks of a hard daily life. They had woken up in their refuge, a corner behind a dumpster, where a pile of boxes and old blankets were their only protection against the cruel cold of dawn. Aurora, being the oldest by only a few minutes, shook her sister's hand firmly. There was a gleam of determination in his eyes. "Today will be different, Helena. We'll find something better, I promise," she said, eliciting a small smile from her sister, hesitant but full of hope. The daily struggle for survival seemed to be the only certainty in their young lives. And now, have you ever wondered how two such innocent lives can face such immense challenges? How do they manage to maintain hope when all seems lost? Aurora and Helena have no one to help them, but at the same time they seem stronger than we imagine. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Arthur Delgado was waking up in the comfort of his luxurious penthouse. He was a renowned businessman, famous for his ability to transform projects into million-dollar profits. His life was impeccable, with an almost robotic precision. Routine was the word that best defined his days. Waking up early, reading the headlines on the tablet, drinking a black coffee and heading to his office in an armored car, always punctually at 8. Behind the facade of success, Arthur carried a silent pain. Years ago, he had lost his only daughter, Laura, in a tragic accident. Since then, he has closed himself off from the world, diving headlong into work and distancing himself from any emotional ties. His life was like his apartment, modern, cold, and isolated. But while Aurora and Helena roamed the busy streets, begging for coins and rummaging through trash bins in search of something to eat, Arthur went on to another day of business. Two very different worlds coexisted in the same city, divided by an invisible line, and then the unexpected happened. At a chaotic intersection, a sports car ran a red light, colliding violently with Arthur's vehicle. The impact was devastating. The car spun several times before stopping in the middle of the street, engulfed in smoke, with pieces of glass scattered everywhere. As pedestrians gathered around the scene, an unexpected encounter began to unfold. Destiny was about to cross paths that seemed destined to never touch. Aurora and Helena were standing anxiously as they waited at the hospital entrance, unaware that they were about to change Arthur Delgado's life. Inside, Arthur pondered. Helena's words, "We want a home," echoed in her mind, a memory that mixed with the smile of her lost daughter, Valeria. Over the days, Arthur tried to return to his usual routine. But even surrounded by the luxury of his penthouse, he couldn't ignore the weight of that simple sentence, but full of meaning. When his assistant Laura brought him the information, he was silent. Aurora and Helena were 8-year-old sisters, orphans for 3 years, living on the streets since their mother's death. They had no one. Arthur felt a pang in his chest. Despite his resistance, a part of him recognized that these girls had rekindled something in his heart, a vulnerability he had tried to bury since losing Valeria. Finally, he made a decision. He called Laura again. "I want them brought to me, now." When Aurora and Helena arrived, their clothes were still shabby, but their eyes shone with hope. Arthur received them in his office, observing every detail, the determination in Aurora's eyes, Helena's protective shyness. He took a deep breath. "You saved me, and I promise to reciprocate." He paused, fighting the hesitation that dominated him. "Then I'll make sure they never have to sleep on the streets again." Aurora looked at him suspiciously, while Helena squeezed his hand tightly. "Are you telling the truth?" asked Aurora. Arthur nodded, with an almost imperceptible smile. "Yes, but I need the same courage you had that day." At that moment, something changed. 3 completely different lives began to intertwine, bringing the promise that, despite all the losses, the home that Aurora and Helena wanted could finally be more than a dream. Aurora and Helena were standing in the center of the market, sharing a piece of bread, when Arthur finally found them. Dressed impeccably, he looked completely out of place in the chaotic environment. For a moment he hesitated, observing the two sisters, so small and fragile in the crowd. He took a deep breath before approaching. "Hello," he said, his voice soft but full of seriousness. Aurora looked up immediately, her suspicious gaze fixing on him. Helena, on the other hand, quickly hid behind her sister. "What are you doing here, sir?" Aurora asked, her voice firm but cautious. Arthur knelt, down to be at their level. "I wanted to know how you are. After what they did for me, it's the least I can do." Aurora crossed her arms, trying to protect Helena from any hidden intentions. "We're fine. There's no need to worry," he replied quickly. But Arthur wasn't convinced. "They don't look like they're doing well," he replied, looking closely at the tired faces and worn-out clothes. "No one should live like this." Helena, who had remained silent until then, finally spoke, her voice low and full of curiosity. "Why did you come? Looking for us?" Arthur sighed, choosing his words carefully. "Because you saved me, and because I believe no one should live the way you are living." The sisters looked at each other, distrust clear in Aurora's eyes. "We don't want money," she said firmly. "We just want to be together and not be afraid." Arthur swallowed hard, feeling the weight of those words. "I understand," he replied calmly, "and I want to help you." Although hesitant, the sisters agreed to accompany Arthur. In the car, as the city passed by the windows, Aurora remained alert, while Helena watched the lights with fascination. When they arrived at the small hotel, prepared for them, Clara giggled as she touched the soft bed. For Arthur, that moment was the beginning of something different. For the first time in years, he felt like he could use what he had to make a difference. For Aurora and Helena, hope, absent for so long, began to show signs of life. Aurora looked at Arthur suspiciously as he placed the bags on the bedroom table. Inside, new clothes and food that the sisters had never imagined having. Helena, more shy, let out a small sigh when she touched the soft fabrics and saw the new shoes. "Is this for us?" Helena asked, looking at Arthur as if expecting a prank. "Yes, it's for you," he confirmed, a little uncomfortable but sincere. Aurora picked up one of the coats carefully, feeling the texture. Although she didn't show it openly, Arthur could tell she was grateful. "Thank you," Aurora said in a serious tone, still cautious. "You don't need to thank me." "It's the least after what they did for me," Arthur replied, as the girls explored. The bags, Helena approached and held Arthur's hand for a moment. "Are you going back tomorrow?" he asked in a low, almost fearful voice. The question took him by surprise. He wasn't used to that kind of expectation, but the sincerity in her eyes disarmed him. "Yes, I'll be back tomorrow," he promised, feeling that this was more than a formality. The next day, Arthur returned to the hotel, and the sisters were waiting for him already dressed in their new clothes. He smiled, noticing a small change in their expressions, still suspicious but now with a glimmer of hope. "I want to talk to you about what comes next," he began, looking directly at Aurora and Helena. "I know it's not easy to trust someone, but I want to help." Aurora frowned, evaluating his words. "What does that mean?" he asked, his voice firm. "It means I want to give you a safe place to live, food, and the chance to study," Arthur explained. Helena, hugging a pillow, looked at him with bright eyes, while Aurora pondered. Finally, she said, "We don't want things that can be taken away. We want something permanent." Arthur felt a lump in his throat. "That's exactly what I want to give you. A house. A home." For the first time, he realized that he had gained some of their trust. Although the road was still long, something had changed between them. It was the beginning of a new bond, one that could transform everyone's lives. Aurora and Helena spent the morning at the small community center that Arthur had found. Clara quickly fell in love with the reading space, diving into the animal picture, books. Aurora, more cautious, watched a drawing class from a distance but ended up being persuaded to participate. When the day ended, Clara proudly held a drawing of a cat, while Aurora carried a notebook with her first written words in years. Back at the hotel, Arthur accompanied them to their room. Clara was radiant, showing the drawing she had made. "Look, it's a cat," he said, his eyes shining with joy. Arthur smiled, examining the figure closely. "It's perfect. You have talent," he praised. Aurora, however, was silent. Sitting by the window, she seemed deep in thought. Arthur decided to give her space, but he knew she was analyzing his every gesture. Shortly afterwards, he called the sisters for a serious conversation. Aurora and Clara sat side by side, with Aurora keeping her arms crossed and her expression alert. "I want to talk about your future," began Arthur. "I've been thinking about how I can help them on a more permanent basis. I want to offer you a home." Clara smiled shyly, but Aurora frowned, clearly suspicious. "Do you want us to move in with you?" "Why, what do you gain from this?" asked Aurora, her voice full of doubt. Arthur took a deep breath before responding. "I gain nothing. I just know that no one should live like you did. I want them to have safety, education, and a place where they don't have to be afraid." Clara looked at Aurora expectantly. "Please, Aurora." "A real home," he murmured. Aurora hesitated, internally struggling with the decision. After a few moments, Arthur intervened. "You don't need to decide now. Think about it. Regardless of what you choose, I will be here to help." He got up and left the room, feeling the weight of the proposal he had made. "I knew I was offering more than just a place to live." He was giving away a part of himself that he had long held back. And for the first time in years, he felt like he was on the right path. That morning, Aurora and Helena were calmer when Arthur arrived at the hotel. Aurora opened the door with her usual posture of caution, while Helena, with a shy smile, peeked behind her. Arthur entered and sat at the table, watching the sisters settle in front of him. He knew the moment was crucial and chose his words carefully. "I thought a lot about what we talked about yesterday," began Arthur, his voice full of calm. "I know this isn't an easy decision for you, and I don't expect you to trust me right away." Helena looked at Aurora for support, and Aurora, after a brief silence, took the floor. "We talked about your proposal. Helena thinks it would be good. She trusts you." Arthur tilted his head slightly, looking directly at Aurora. "And you?" Aurora crossed her arms, pondering before responding. "I'm not sure yet, but I also know that we cannot continue living the way we have lived until now. If you really deliver what you promised, we're willing to give it a try." Arthur nodded seriously. "I will comply. I will do everything so that you can feel safe and start a new life." Helena, with a sweetness that contrasted with the seriousness of the conversation, asked in a low voice, "So we'll never have to go back to the streets again?" Arthur leaned forward slightly, his expression firm and determined. "No more streets. I want them to have a home, a place where they can grow and dream." Aurora watched him closely, looking for any sign of doubt or insincerity. He found nothing but conviction. After a moment, she finally nodded. "We accept." The simplicity of the answer carried enormous weight. For Arthur, it meant a deep commitment. For the sisters, it was a chance to start over. Helena smiled widely. While Aurora relaxed for the first time in a long time, Arthur felt like for the first time in years, he was doing something that really mattered. He knew the road would be long and full of challenges, but now they were. No longer alone, a new chapter had begun, not just for Aurora and Helena, but for him as well. And you, do you want to continue seeing exciting and inspiring stories? Click the subscribe button so you don't miss any news.